It is time for CNN News with Estefania Pantoja. Good day. Today is where we will look back upon the year 1941, reviewing our government's challenges during this year, how our society was affected by all the events that occurred during this year, America's culture during that time, and a special report on 1941's economy. Now with politics during 1941, we had our president, Franklin Roosevelt, who cared about his country and began the fireside chat, asking his fellow citizens to be arsenal of democracy, which then led to his Four Freedoms speech. Then we also had British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. Then from Germany there was Adolf Hitler, and from Japan we had Prime Minister who was first Fumimaro Konoe, then Hideki Toho. Through this year, some of our major issues were on December 7, 1941, when Pearl Harbor was hit, and quickly the U.S. and Britain declared war on Japan, causing the U.S. to abandon its state of isolation and entering World War II. Now let's look back at footage of December 7, 1941, with one of our casters, Cindy Garcia.
To bring you this important bulletin from the United Press. Flash, Washington. The White House announces Japanese attack.
Hello, I'm Cindy Garcia, and we're here at Pearl Harbor where the bombing has just occurred. Hello, we're here on the same where Dr. Jessica is attending the victims. Dr. Jessica. What are the casualties right now? If you please say.
Cindy, hello, are you there? Oh, and it appears we have just lost connection with Cindy Garcia. What devastating news for our country this day, where this impact was very devastating to all of us here in the United States. Now moving on to foreign policies, our government, in response to Pearl Harbor, stopped the trade of oil, scrap metal with Japan. Before entering World War II, President Roosevelt signed the 1941 Lend-Lease in January of 1941, allowing him to lend military equipment to countries that he believed were in need. Another policy was the Atlantic Charter, where Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill met and came to an agreement, in other words, peace rules, leading to 9 other allied governments pleading to follow the common principles of this policy. As for domestic policies, the first U.S. federal-owned airport in Washington, D.C., the beginning of the construction of the Pentagon, and the organization of the U.S. Civil Airport, also known as CAP, where it aids American citizens in the education of aerospace. Now going on to the economy, it had been said that the Great Depression had came to an end. But how is it that there was still 11% inflation during that year? In addition, the U.S. decides to lend $1 million to the Soviet Union on November. Plus, during 1941, our annual budget was only $9 billion, and out of those billion, $6 million were borrowed by the federal government. Now moving on to the culture in 1941. Now we have many movies that came out during this year, but the most popular ones were Dumbo, The Maltese Falcon, and Citizen Kane, in which Orson Welles not only directed but also acted in his movie Citizen Kane. Now going on to sports, beginning with Jane Vaughan, who was a female athlete who won a championship in figure skating. Going on to baseball, there was a Detroit pitcher, Alan Benton, who was the first to collect 2 sacrifices in the inning. And then there was the Phillies, who lost the club record in their 111th game. Going on to golf, we have Golf Masters Championships. There was Craig Woods, who shot a .220 a 280, excuse me, and 1. Now, on to music. There was many fine music that came out during this year. And we have a first gold record presented to Glenn Miller, who, with her first hit, Chaga Choo Choo. Frank Centinara and Tom Dorsey with their first orchestra record called Everything Happens to Me. And lastly, Duke Ellington with his first record, Take the A Train. In art this year, abstract expressionism came alive. On March 16 of 1941, the National Gallery of Art opened in Washington, D.C. Throughout that year, there were several comics, such as the comic Captain America, followed by the first comic strip to appear in the newspapers, which was by Gus Arriola, called Gordo. And moving on to society. Our education during that time, 1941, the discovery of penicillin occurred. Not to mention that the very first commercial extraction of magnesium from seawater was founded in Freeport, Texas. Also in that year, Dr. Glenn T. Seaborg was the first to produce and isolate plutonium. Plus, on March 1st, was the first U.S. commercial FM radio station that went on air in Nashville, Tennessee. As for society itself, it's not to mention that segregation was still strictly enforced in the District of Columbia in 1941. For instance, a time where North Carolina State University and Marysville College chose to play for a championship called the Negro College Football Championship, while no African Americans were allowed to play pro football during that time. Although on July 19 of that year, the United States opened the first flying school for black cadets. Laws. Laws throughout that year happened to be the Supreme Court upheld federal wage and hour law, which sets minimum wages and max hours. We also have the Executive Order 8802, forbidding discrimination, Fair Employment Practices Commission, where companies with government contracts cannot discriminate on the basis of race or religion. As for fashion during this time, we had a lot of suits, and convertible suits. On October 27, the Chicago Daily Tribune editorialized that there would not be war with Japan. Although what a fine decision it was to declare war on Japan, despite that meaning that we would have to enter World War II and break our hold on being isolated from the rest of the world. The United States could not by any means permit any other country to cause damage on our lands, and therefore we had to return fire.